if Jackson State Demonstration Forest went and put this through the environmental work and went put these sales up for bid, that should have been behind them. Now it's kind of like, well, you're going to wait for somebody who's suing you to dictate what your policy is, and it's really hurting families and businesses in my district. And I'm really upset with this whole process, because it's taken, I mean, I guess court litigation can go on, but this has been several years now, and it has to stop. I mean, it's the wrong policy to run a public forest.
Well, certainly it's not our policy to be embroiled in ongoing litigation. We're working very hard to get ourselves out of a situation where we are hamstrung by litigation, and as I said, we are working hard in negotiations to resolve the remaining outstanding issues with respect to the Brandon Camp 3 timber sales and move forward with those, as well as to move forward with the other harvesting plans, the new harvesting plans that have been put out. We certainly understand the concerns of Willits Redwoods, and we've spent long hours in discussion with them about their concerns, and are working hard to do what we can to address them. It has taken a long time, yes, and we are working to move forward very hard.
Yeah, my main point is not just the companies, it's the families that's involved in too.
Yes.
This is far-reaching. I mean, these are working families' livelihood that is dependent on a decision that may be held off more years in court. I don't know. But there has to be some resolve to this. And it's unacceptable to have. I think it's just 4 years now it's been going on.
Yes, 4 or 5 years. It has been a long time.
That's unacceptable by anybody's standards.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Henley, maybe you could review for us, what is the status now with the enjoined plans that, as have been referenced by my colleagues, that have been approved? What is the status of that with respect to the intervention and the need to communicate with the courts? Have the courts signed off on them? My understanding from being a member of the statewide group that has also been very concerned with this process is that that we wanted it to move forward in an expeditious way, but the limits of the department and your staff and even the board of forestry to engage in that dialogue was sort of set by the legalities around the court situation. So could you just sort of bring us up to date on where we are with those plans that had to go back to the court that had to then be approved or reviewed once the management plan was adopted, which happened in January?
Right, and there are several things going on which could take up large amounts of time to explain. But there was a stipulated settlement agreement signed a number of years ago between the department, the Board of Forestry, and the litigants in this case, with respect to how, once the new management plan was done, the new EIR was certified, how the process would move forward with respect to Brandon and Camp 3. So we're moving through the steps of that process, as well as having some additional discussions that could potentially result in more rapid resolution of issues and a reduced likelihood of future litigation with respect to these harvesting plans. So we're trying to have as open and complete negotiations as we can with the parties involved in order to move things forward as expeditiously as possible to as stable as an outcome as possible, one that is not going to lead to further litigation with respect to those two harvesting plans.
So is the court still involved in the process, or basically have they set this process that you're referring to now and they're out of the discussion?
Part of this process was set up aside from the court. It was a regular court process and a separate settlement agreement between the parties. The EIR final EIR has to go back to the court for the court to examine and determine whether or not we have cured what they found to be deficiencies in the EIR. So that has been returned to the court and is in process. We have not heard back from the court yet.
I mean, I certainly would like to add my support for what my colleagues have said in terms of having the process go forward in this expeditious fashion. I feel that, though it's important to comment that your department, and we all know the state of the state budget, is, you know, you're really constricted right now with revenue and with staff. And from what I've known, you really have done a very, very good job in trying to advance this, given the resource and the other demands that you have. And I know that you personally have really tried to work towards this end to get this resolved in the best possible way. But aside from that, and I think we actually commented on this topic at our last meeting here, which was 8 or so months ago, the Jackson demonstration state process has been, as we all know, a very contentious one. But it really is also one of, I think, great hope in terms of where we need to go with discussions on the resource-based economy and the different disputes that we have had here for long standing. And it really is a tribute to our local working group that worked on the alternatives for the management plan, several of which are listed in the names that you read to us that will be on the Jackson Advisory Group. And I really want to commend you for really trying to advance the process, and really commend the director for really listening to locals. There was some concern a number of months ago that was expressed at the local forest council that's advisory to the Board of Supervisors, as well as the state body, and a number of letters of concern from folks that perhaps the director really had his own agenda with respect to making it more of a state-driven group, and that locals' opinions and expertise, if you will, that was part of what made the management, the working groups, and they really were very, very much a working group of timber interests, a number of them, and environmental perspectives, a number of them locally, that might be sort of put to the back burner, and that the local vision and success of that process wouldn't be really incorporated into your future actions. And I think it's a real tribute to the director, because we have 8 or more local names here, actually I believe 9. And so the director truly did listen to the local voice, and I think that again is a tribute to the Mendocino Working Group that actually moved this very divisive issue forward. And the director really, I think, has made a very, very good attempt to bring that process and that goodwill and that success story to the Jackson Demonstration State Forward Advisory appointments that he's made. So I really would like to commend him for doing that and your efforts, and I think that everyone really does want to get this going as soon as possible, and that includes this actual season. So whatever you can do to move forward the plans that you can, I think it's much appreciated by this body. And I do appreciate the work that has gone into this, because there's so much behind the scenes that you have to do when you're dealing with a regulatory agency and a number of components of that, and the legal environment that got us to this point. So I really want to commend you for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Henley, 2 relatively easy questions, I hope. In your plan, you list a number of categories of members of the advisory group. There's 14 different categories. I think you've presented us a list of 13 names here. How well did we target those groups with appointees?
I think they're pretty well targeted, and the charter language doesn't say that isn't hard in terms of you have to hit all these, but I think we really, it does compare very well in terms of the range of kinds of local interests and expertise and things like that that are on that chart. I think there's a pretty good fit. Some of these people, you know, could serve on several of those slots that are on that list of structure. Well,
I think Ruben's done a heck of a job laying out this group of people and trying to fulfill that mandate. Even though it's not a mandate, it's an achievable goal. But I believe Ruben did do a heck of a job listening to local folks. This list of people on there.
He spent a lot of time. He spent 4 full days interviewing people. We had a little over 30 applicants, and every applicant who took the next step to be interviewed and came forward was willing to be interviewed, was interviewed. So he spent a lot of time on it, was very systematic about it, and I think had a good opportunity to really get the measure of the applicants and make the best choices.
One last question.